Hello, my name is Kim, and I am here to bring you this video about Lesson 3, specifically the Explore Part 1 water cycle game. And I want to say right at the beginning that this video is for mission advisors / teachers, not for students. All right, so just an overview of the 5 E's, and of course the 6th E is extend. We are in the explore part of the lesson. This is a very large part of this lesson. There are 3 parts, and this video is about part 1, but there are other videos about part 2 and part 3. All right, so the first decision that you'll need to make about this game is which way you want to play. There are 4 ways that we are going to outline, and our recommended way is the whole group kinesthetic model where students are moving around the classroom to different stations. This is recommended, but we know that it won't be practical for everyone, so we've provided some other alternatives which I'll go over later in this video, but at first we're going to focus on the recommended model, which is the whole group kinesthetic model. All right, so what do you need for this model? The first thing is the 9 station cards printed and placed around the room where students can see them. You can see the list of the 9 station cards here. And also over here, you can see an example of what one of the station cards looks like. So you can see here that it tells the students if they roll whatever number 1 through 6, where they should move. And note that there's often a roll that makes you stay where you are, and we will model what that looks like in a moment. You will also need dice, and that's 1 per student. Students can use virtual dice like on their phones or whatever, but I find it to be easier for them to carry a physical dice around. And then they will need the printed student handout, which you'll find in the lesson plan, and we'll see in a moment, and something to write with. To get ready to play the game, the first thing you will do is distribute the students around the room. You will start 1 student at each station except the ocean station and send everyone else to the ocean. And students hopefully will wonder why this is the case. And it's a great opportunity to discuss why the majority of the students are going to ocean. In this model, the students represent drops of water, and most of the water on Earth by far is found in our oceans. After you have the students stationed at their station cards, you will model what a round of play looks like. And I will do that for you now. I'm going to model as if I was modeling for students. All right, you can see here your handout, and at round 1, this first station has a box around it. That is the station where you will start. So for this modeling of a couple of rounds of play, I am going to talk about the student who is starting at the lake station. So you can see here the title lake is at the top. And so I will write lake as my start station for round 1. The next thing I will do is I will roll my die. And in this case, let's say I roll a 5. So I go here to my chart and I see that it says if I roll a 5, that I should move to the clouds. So I'm going from the lake to the clouds. So I will write clouds here on my handout. That's my station that I'm going to move to. And then I'm going to move to the cloud station. And this is what the cloud station card looks like over here. And so I'm going to now start round 2, and I'm starting at clouds. So whatever station gets written here, then you will repeat it again here. Now that I am at the cloud station and I have examined my station card, I'm going to roll the dice again. And in this case, I have rolled a 6. So on my station, it says if I roll a 6, then I go to clouds. Well, I'm already at clouds. So in this case, I'm just going to kind of stay here. So I will write clouds once again because I'm not going anywhere. And then I will write clouds here to say that that's the start of round 3. And then I will roll again and I will follow the directions and so on. And so students will leave this blank for now. Once you have modeled a couple of rounds of play, as I just did, then you can make sure that your students understand what they're supposed to do and play 10 rounds and record on their handouts. Then they should return to their seats after they have done 10 rounds until everyone finishes. And I just want to state this clearly. one student isn't going at a time. They're all rolling, recording, and moving all at once. It's going to be chaotic, but it's not going to take that long because they're not waiting and going in turns. It's not that kind of a game because all the drops of water, which are our students, are moving around at the same time. All right, so after students have recorded their 10 rounds, now it is time for a discussion. These discussion questions and more are in the lesson, along with some guiding tips on how to get the most out of a student discussion. The idea here is that this game is modeling the water cycle and how and why water moves from place to place in the water cycle and changes form. So find these discussion questions in the lesson plan and make sure that students have some understandings before you move on. What you do in that third column of the handout will depend on your students and what your specific learning goals are around the water cycle. For instance, for elementary students, you might just ask them if the water is solid, liquid, or vapor gas in each row, or if it's changing from one form to another. So for instance, when we went from lake to clouds, are we going from solid, liquid, or gas? And are we staying in that form or are we changing form? So you might want to ask them to think about that for each role and fill that in that third column. For older students or more students with more background in the water cycle, you might ask them to consider what process or energy is causing the water to move or change. And the lesson plan has a word bank for you to use with those more advanced students on that third column of the handout. The purpose of this game is to help students reach some essential understandings about the water cycle. And you can see them listed here. They're also in the lesson plan. Some foundational understanding is that water moves and changes and that not all drops of water take the same path. This is a huge misunderstanding and misconception that goes along with the water cycle because we always see those diagrams of the water moving in a perfect circle. And students get the idea that all drops of water follow that same path. And that is just simply not the case. So hopefully this game and the reflection questions after the game will help them understand that water is constantly moving and changing in our water cycle, and not every drop of water is doing the same thing. Some intermediate or advanced noticings that students might have about the game are also listed there, and you can see the lesson plan for more information about those. All right, so that's how to play the whole group kinesthetic model, which is our recommended model, but I just briefly want to go over some other ways that you can play this game, the small group tabletop model being first. So for this small group tabletop model, what you will need is to print out the game board, which is in a Google slide for you. And I strongly recommend printing this 11 by 17 so that the students can read all the little directions on it. And you need one printed tabletop game board per group. The students still need dice or virtual dice, and they also need that same handout and a writing utensil. To play the tabletop version, students will also need some sort of game pieces, like out of a Monopoly game or something like that. And that's one per student so that they can keep track of themselves as they're moving around the board. Here's an enlarged version of what the game board looks like. So you can see here that the stations are marked and have the image, and then the directions for each station are different. And so students will move from station to station based on the directions at their station. And once again, I want to emphasize students are not taking turns. Once you get them set up, they can all be rolling and recording on their individual sheets at the same time. Another way to play is the small group online model. This involves a Google slide deck, and you will need to make a copy of the Google slide deck so that your students can edit it. And you will need to make a copy of the game board slide so that there is one slide per team. Make sure that they know which slide is the one that they're working on, or just to avoid that confusion, you can make a different slide deck entirely for each group. Students will still need dice or virtual dice, as well as the same handout that we looked at before. Of course, it's your prerogative if you want to make the handout something students are filling out online, but they all need their own copy either way. All right, so this is what the Google slide deck looks like for the game boards. And this is the group play slide. You can see here it's slide 3. And off to the left, you'll see there are some game chips where students will each claim one and put their name there. And this is what they will move around so that they know which station they are each at. But again, they can be doing that all at the same time. They don't have to wait. I also have a link here off to the right to a virtual die in case you don't have physical die for students to do this. The recording sheet and the handout remains the same as during the whole group kinesthetic model. It's just the students aren't moving around the classroom. Instead, they're sitting in small groups, moving around this board. And we recommend groups of 4 to 6 students, depending on your setup. All right, there's also kind of a last resort individual online model, and you will need a different slide on the Google slide deck, and it's 1 slide per student if they're working individually. They still need dice and they still need the handout. And here is what the individual tracking slide looks like. You can see here it's slide 4. And instead of having their names here, it's just numbering the stations. And so the student individually working on this slide will drag the start to wherever you ask them to start, and then roll the die and drag these number chips onto the board as they go so that they'll be able to have a visual representation of their individual path. Again, this is for individual student tracking. If you had several students all tracking their path in this way, it would get really, really confusing. So no matter which model you're using, it is essential that you discuss and reflect and reach those essential understandings that are listed in the lesson plan. So the lesson plan contains guidance on this. If students don't construct those essential understandings on their own, you may have to go back and revisit different stations and ask them probing questions such as why water might be moving from the lake to the clouds, right? Why might water be moving from the clouds to the ocean? Things like that, and really asking them probing questions based on your knowledge of the water cycle to help them reach those essential understandings. Some standards alignment highlights for this water cycle game. From the Next Generation Science Standards, Science and Engineering Practices, this game is a model. A model is anything that is not the real thing, but that can help students achieve understanding. And so a game or a simulation like this is considered a model. So they are definitely developing and using models in this part of the lesson, and they will use this model to reach those essential understandings of the water cycle in this part of the lesson. And in the content standards for Next Generation Science Standards, we're talking about Earth and space science, specifically around the Earth and the water cycle and how water moves and changes. You can find the specific standards in the lesson standards alignment documents. If you want to learn more about this lesson and the water cycle game, please go to the NSBE website for the companion course and click on lesson 3. Inside the lesson, you will find links to the printable game boards, the game board Google slides, all sorts of other things that you need to do this part of the lesson. Another video is available for parts 2 and part 3 of this lesson. Part 3 involves this water cycle game again, so please check out those videos as you progress through the lesson. Good luck with the water cycle game.